So there's no one actually watching yet, but for people watching in the future, morning. It's 7:59 a.m. Central Time, so we're waiting for. Oh wait, hey, actually got a first streamer. Hi, first watcher. So yes, we're waiting for the live stream to start from the Senate. So this is going to be the David Shipman confirmation hearing. Hopefully, this is actually going to be the third time he was supposed to be confirmed to. Or I shouldn't say confirmed, voted on. They don't have the votes for it. To the head of the ATF, and obviously this guy is a freaking moron who's done a bunch of stupid stuff. And I'm not going to be talking during the hearing. I'm just going to be talking until they start the stream. So don't worry about it. I'm not going to be one of those annoying guys. Like, I don't know if you guys watch Louder or Prouder. I love the show, but it seems like every time they play something, they talk through when they're playing a clip. It's like, hey Steven, shut up so I can actually pay attention to what the hell's going on. I can't hear anything. But yes, David Shipman with an S, because that's what he is a pathological liar and a narcissist. The guy. I mean, he thinks a lot of stupid stuff. The guy. I mean, like you said, there's some stuff a lot of people aren't aware of, like when he talks about the helicopters in Waco. If you watch the 1997 documentary about Waco, it is true that they were shooting at helicopters. And one of the helicopters was actually damaged from being shot and had to land because of its being damaged from being shot at. Now, they weren't shooting at it with 50 calibers. There was no 50 caliber rifles or ammunition recovered from Mount Carmel. Which cool part is my buddy who knows the guy who owns the place is going to see if I get a chance to go up there. I don't want to go up there and be like a tourist, just to go up there and pay my respect. But no, they weren't shot down. They weren't shot by 50 calibers. What a lot of people don't know is those two old Hueys that were flying around the compound actually had machine guns on them and were shooting at the Branch Davidians from helicopters as they were flying around in circles. I know if you guys watch my other live stream I had, there was actually an unarmed gentleman who was on top of one of the silos who was scraping rust off it to paint it, and they thought he had a handgun instead of a scraper and shot him dead. And, they wouldn't allow the Branch Davidians to go out there for 5 days to recover his body, so he just sat there in the sun doing what nature does to unfortunately deceased people. And then once they finally did allow them out there to get him and bury him, when he was out there and had been buried in their plot, they kept driving over their plot of deceased people with their track vehicles while mooning them and giving them fingers. So they weren't exactly the most polite people in the morning. Hey, John, how's it going? I hope everything's going better for you with all the stupid bull stuff that's been going on lately. But yeah, David Shipman, not a good guy. Obviously, he was an ATF agent, lost his firearm. Still haven't said whether or not if it was a pistol or rifle. Either way, we talk about keeping guns off the streets and out of the hands of criminals. But, when you're one of the guys losing a gun and giving it basically to the criminals, now, there had been rumors going around that he was also part of Ruby Ridge. I don't know if that's true or not. I've only heard it from one source, so I'm not going to confirm that. But that, like I said, that was something that was also said. Yeah, But I don't know if you guys heard. It wasn't his confirmation hearing, but if it was hearing to be brought up, he tried to say that the pictures of him at Waco were fake, weren't him. They were doctored, which there was a big debate about whether or not Photoshop existed back then. Yeah, Photoshop did exist back then, but the level to be able to do that kind of fakery. Yeah, fakery. I don't know if fakery a word. It's either way, it's fun. The kind of photographic fakery to be able to put his face onto that body back in that time in the 90s when we were still using film was capable, but you had to be at a government level and have to have some pretty damn expensive equipment to do it. So I don't know why anyone in the world would actually spend the money and time and resources, because that picture was brought as part of the investigation of Waco back in the 90s. So it wasn't like something that recently was done. It was something that happened back then. Then he tried saying, oh, well, it's just not a picture of me. It's like, you going to get your lies straight, guy? Because I don't quite understand exactly what the hell you're talking about. You're like, it's Photoshop. Then you're like, it's not me. Oh, I was there, but I wasn't there till like 3 months later during an investigation. You know, I don't believe you. I think you're a pathological liar. I think you just lie whatever you feel like comes into your head. He's like that dumb kid at school. We all know that one kid when we were growing up who was just a horrible liar. So he'd make up a lie, and then whenever he didn't believe it, he would just switch to another lie and like, no, we're not believing that. Then he'd switch to another lie. It's like, you know, when you just make up new lies constantly, we're not believing anything you say. That's basically him. Then, of course, he was part of Fast and the Furious, and I'm not talking about the movie franchise. So he was literally giving guns to Mexican drug cartels that, you know, and that's one everyone's like, that killed a few Americans. Like, yeah, it sucks. It did kill a few Americans, but, you know, it didn't like kill massive amount of Americans. What I care about is how many Hispanic Americans did it kill? They put the guns in the hands of Mexican cartels that probably killed hundreds of Hispanic people. Us American, our American government allowed guns to go to Mexico where they're illegal. International illegal gun trading to Mexico, where we put them in the hands of international drug cartel members that killed hundreds, if not possibly thousands, of innocent Mexican citizens. Yes, the couple of Americans that died is sad. Don't get me wrong. But that does not even imagine the amount of people that were killed in Mexico. That's the tragedy there. A lot of people overlook that. Mexico, I don't know if you guys remember, like just like 2-3 years ago, when they're like, you don't go across the border, especially here in Texas. Yeah, they're like, don't go to Juarez. Do not cross the border. The drug wars are so bad right now that we can't guarantee your safety. Like, you might get shot in the street, you might get kidnapped. There's some bad shit going on, and they weren't joking. And why? Because we were funneling guns their way. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, even if we don't give them guns, they're going to get guns. But the fact that we just made it easy for them, instead of them having to get it from overseas or from China or wherever, they like, oh, we can from America real easy, right here, bam, there you go. Okay, Rose Blight, it's early Rose. I'm sorry. That pic of Chipman was put out back then. I believe I saw it on the media news program about it. Yeah, Rose, it's hard to tell. We know the pic's real because it came from the FBI. Introduced it as information during the trial. We know it's a real pic because those are the guys that took the pictures. The feds took the pictures of themselves posing with dead children in the background. These guys are dicks. Don't get me wrong, I was in the military. I've seen some stuff. I've done some stuff. I had some pictures of some stuff, but I got rid of it before I left Iraq. And I had that pictures of stuff because like I got a profile of the different things going on. You know, but I didn't bring it back and be like, hey, look, here's me posing with this dead Iraqi. I didn't do that kind of stuff. That's sick. You know, after the Baghdad market bombing and there's chunks of children laying around, I wasn't out there with my camera taking pictures of dead children when we're picking it up. That's just wrong. I didn't take pictures of any of that stuff. No. That's messed up on a whole new level of screwed upness. This guy is weird. No problem. Nice little swim gym earlier too. Yeah, Rose. I got my coffee. I pre-made it last night. I don't like hot coffee too much. I like my cold coffee though. I make it super strong. It's a mixture of espresso, frappuccino, and super strong coffee. So I don't do weak coffee. It's got to be strong, and I like it sweet too. Unless it's like a really smooth coffee, then I'll drink it black. But if it's bitter, no. I know. I'm just filling in right now until the actual live stream starts. I don't know if you guys saw my video. I put up one about we're talking about the new regulations they got for the stupid what they're proposing for law for pistols. You got that little worksheet here where you go through. I did a video yesterday, and I took all the pistols that I've shown on the channel, and I graded them versus what the proposed law is, with length, weight, length of pole, features, and all that. And YouTube's like, you know what? Screw you, Jim. Your video is going to be demonetized because we're not going to tell you why. Just demonetized. That was annoying. It's like, hey, I spent like 4 hours in that damn video going through measuring stuff. I can't show it now, but I got a whole wall of guns over here, all pistols. And it was funny because every pistol I own, even the ones I didn't show, every one of them cannot pass that test. I don't know if you guys had looked at it, but this thing is stupid. For the new pistol brace thing, I mean, first of all, it has to be at least 64 ounces. And believe it or not, one of my AR pistols, a full weight AR pistol with a side charger, so it's got a heavier upper, with buffer tube, no lightweight parts, standard lower, has a hand guard, has a regular buffer tube. Actually has a heavy buffer in it. All that was less than 64 ounces. So believe it or not, one of mine was actually too light. So they wanted it to be at least 64 ounces. And that's, it's a light one, but geez. And they say it has to be between 12 and 26 inches. It's like, okay, I get 12 inches, kind of, but it's like my friend Gene, he just got diagnosed with ALS, so I call him my gimp. It's a loving term. But he's got his Glock 40. Glock 40 is the long slide 10 millimeter. And that's his most favorite handgun in the world. He loves that gun. But he couldn't shoot it anymore because his hand strength has went to the shat. So he sold it to me because I own all the 10 millimeter Glocks. I got a 10 millimeter AR. I'm a 10 millimeter fan. It's one of my favorite cartridges. And I bought one of the rigs for it that goes into it, has the collapsible pistol brace and all that stuff. And I basically gave it back to him, said, hey, man, here you go. So that way he can still shoot it with his ALS because it gives him more points of contact because it has like a forward magazine insert area that allows him to get a little bit better of a grip because, let's face it, you shoot pistols, you shoot two-handed. Plus it gives him an area where he can brace his arm area on it. So he can still shoot his most favorite gun in the world. But according to these new regulations here, even though it's designed for him with ALS, an actual medical condition to allow him to continue to shoot, it would make that gun illegal because it's not within weight. But dumb stuff like that. And I don't know if you guys get a chance to look at this, but yeah, go. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. Go look at this. It's a bunch of trash. Basically, if you want to have a pistol that's legal, you need to have a pistol buffer tube that's not extended with a brace that has a wraparound cuff that has a strap that's not made out of elastic, that has some kind of device that makes it so it's anti-shouldering, like little spikes or something to stab you if you try to shoulder it, has a really short length of pole, which even with the standard, like they have, what is the length of pole on this? What was it? 10.5 or less than 10.5 inches. Here's the problem with the standard AR, you can't have 10.5 inches because just the standard length buffer tube to a standard trigger pull is greater than 10.5 inches. You would have to get one of those ultra short mini. Oh, here we go. Time for Jim to shut up.
Today will be the committee. I think all of you know Lee, who is staff director in the last for the committee. He will be going to Charleston to work in the U.S. Attorney's Office. He is applying to be an Army Reservist JAG. I don't know what the hell is holding up the Army, but we'll have that discussion later. The bottom line is, Lee, you did a heck of a job for our committee. You've been indispensable in negotiating police reform efforts. You should be proud of what you've accomplished, and I'm very proud of you, and I wish you well. So thank you.
Senator Grant, because we've worked on so many things together, I want to join kind words definitely all of us. Staff director of a difficult and challenging time to challenge. It wasn't because of it, just a challenge.
A lot of it.
My staff tells me they cannot recall Lee ever losing his so that's high praise. Thank you for your contributions, especially on the First Step Act. You're headed back home to South Carolina with your beloved wife, Ryan, your daughter, Lucy, and your dog, Mark Winston, who was often seen called nurture. Like for actually living through liberal mansion homes. Services, assistance. I know I speak for everyone that you're sustained by the best staff. You are one of the nation's best. Well, nominees and 2 bills, 5 nominees, list of first time held over at the party. Second circuit. So, nominees to the Western District of Washington.
Okay. Has almost 20 years of experience in immigration law and policy. She would be the first woman to serve in that position. She's well qualified for it. Sorely need experience and competent leadership there. She's the daughter of immigrants from Mexico and Iraq. Ms. Shadu began her career working on immigration policy and oversight for 9 years in the House. She later served as chief counsel at USCIS, and as chief counsel, she managed more than 200 attorneys supporting the work of that agency worldwide.
the American Federation of Government Employees National Citizenship and Immigration Service Council 119, union that represents over 13,000 employees there, specifically highlighted this in their letter of support. And she's well acquainted with the operations of this agency. We also have two bipartisan bills on the markup agenda that are interesting and have some controversy to them. A bill I'm co-sponsoring with Chuck Grassley on cameras in the courtroom related to the Supreme Court, and a bill that Senators Grassley and Klobuchar are bringing before us called Sunshine in the Courtroom Act. As we approach the end of another Supreme Court term, many of us have been intently watching the news for updates on latest decisions. While we may disagree on how the justices decide a case, I hope we can agree that it would be healthy for our democracy for the American people to actually see the court in action. That's what's behind this bill. We worked on this on a bipartisan basis, and I hope we can pass both of these bills today. There are a number of amendments. With that, I'll turn to Ranking Member Grassley.
I can't do better than Senator Durbin did in just describing why we need cameras in the courtroom. I've been involved with this issue, for those of you who've been on this committee for a long period of time, for just so many years. I hope we can finally get this done at this time. I think if the people can see how justice is done, they'll have a better appreciation for that justice. Right now, the working of the court is a remote process that most people don't really know much about unless they're lawyers or criminals. These bills would help change all that for 330 million Americans. The Cameras in the Courtroom Act tells the Supreme Court to televise its hearings absent a vote by a majority of the caucus or the court, that doing so would violate due process. The Sunshine in the Courtroom Act allows presiding judges to televise their proceedings subject to various protections for security and for due process. There's a lot of talk these days about reforming the courts in a way that that's just a preemptive threat against justices for ruling in ways that people might not like. These bills aren't in that category. These are actual reforms to get actual transparency and improve civic health. I hope we can report these bills out today and bring greater transparency to the workings of this third branch. Now to the nominees. Margaret Strickland is a nominee to the District of New Mexico. Without a doubt, she's an accomplished criminal defense attorney, like the vast majority of Biden's nominees. Also, like the vast majority of this administration's nominees, Ms. Strickland won't admit to having a judicial philosophy. At the same time, when Ms. Strickland applied to be district judge, her reaction was apparently to call Chris King, demand justice for advice. To borrow from one of my Democratic friends, I can't help but notice coincidences sometimes. If you reach out to demand justice about getting a judgeship and you then get that judgeship, the burden is on that person to show me that you're a Bill of Rights judge and not a criminal defense judge. Ms. Strickland, unfortunately, doesn't satisfy that burden. I will also be opposing the nomination of Ms. Jadu to be Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. This decision comes from the way she didn't answer questions. I've long had concern about DHS's unlawful use of parole authority to grant parole to broad classes of people. In my view, this is a clear violation of the Immigration and Nationality Act's requirements that parole be granted, quote, unquote, only on a case-by-case basis. In my exchange with Ms. Jadu, during her confirmation hearing and at her responses to my questions for the record, she did not appear to share that view. She also refused to rule out the use of executive authority to bypass Congress and grant parole in place to broad classes of people who meet eligibility criteria in bills Congress has either rejected or refused to pass. As an example, in my questions for the record, I specifically asked Ms. Jadu if she supported a plan put forward by then presidential candidate, now Vice President Harris, to bypass Congress and grant parole in place to potentially millions of immigrants who have not been granted a path to legal counsel status by Congress. She refused to answer. Given ongoing debates in Congress about offering a path to legal status to various groups of people living in the United States and having violated our laws to get here, her refusal to endorse any real limits on executive branch use of parole authority greatly concerns me. Lastly, we have David Chipman to be head of ATF. Ever since Mr. Chipman's nomination was announced, I have been hearing from law-abiding gun owners in Iowa who are concerned about this nomination. He hasn't dispelled these concerns during his confirmation process. In fact, he probably reinforced them. Mr. Chipman wants to ban assault weapons, but can't seem to explain what an assault weapon is. Mr. Chipman has repeatedly mocked gun owners as rubes and tuxes. Mr. Chipman has been described by CNN as, quote, unquote, a fierce advocate for gun control. Indeed, there isn't a prominent gun controller he hasn't worked for. This nomination is like a Republican putting the NRA in charge of the ATF. Aside from Mr. Chipman, ATF has also failed to fully respond to my and Senator Johnson's oversight request regarding the October 2018 Hunter Biden firearms incident. That's when Hunter Biden's gun was discarded near a school. In response, ATF used the Freedom of Information Act to shield to not produce records. That position shows an incompetent agency in need of reform. But instead of getting a reformer, it gets an activist. I will be opposing that nomination.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. The first nomination is Margaret Strickland to be U.S. District Judge for the District of New Mexico. Are there any senators seeking recognition? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Leahy.
Aye.
Ms. Feinstein.
Aye.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Romano. Mr. Booker. Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Oswald.
Aye.
Mr. Grassley.
No.
Mr. Graham.
Aye. Proxy.
Mr. Cornyn.
No.
Mr. Lee. Mr. Cruz.
No by proxy.
Mr. Sass.
No by proxy.
Mr. Hawley.
No.
Mr. Cotton.
No by proxy.
Mr. Kennedy.
No.
Mr. Tillis.
No by proxy.
Ms. Blackburn.
No by proxy.
Chair Durbin.
Aye.
Chair, the votes are 12 yeas, 10 nays.
The nomination will be favorably reported to the floor. The next nominee,
Mr. Chairman, may I ask unanimous consent that my statement on the Strickland nomination be made part of the record?
of course.
Thank you.
Unfavorably reporting the nomination of David Chipman to be Director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Any senator seek recognition? Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I strongly oppose David Chipman's nomination to serve as the Director of ATF for many reasons. Almost too many reasons here to name them individually. So I'll attempt to focus on my top few concerns. In response to questions at his confirmation hearing before this committee, Mr. Chipman said he was a cop, not a lawyer. This statement is troubling, not only because Mr. Chipman was using it to dodge legitimate questions, but also because in making it, he willfully ignores the focus of the ATF director's position is to accurately interpret and apply the laws Congress writes for the regulation of the firearms industry. I'm not saying that it takes a lawyer to do that, but it certainly takes someone who recognizes the impact of regulatory decisions. I'm concerned that Mr. Chipman used that cute line to persuade us that his advocacy background is less troubling than it might otherwise appear to be. Based on Mr. Chipman's bombastic and often inaccurate statements made while working as a lobbyist for two major anti-gun groups, Giffords and Everytown, I have strong concerns about his ability to set aside his personal views, to work with the firearms industry and with law-abiding gun owners to effectively run ATF. For example, just last year, Mr. Chipman made a statement openly mocking first-time gun owners. He compared them to the Tiger King, a popular reality TV star who exhibited questionable judgment in relation to firearms and also large endangered megafauna. He also then advised them to hide their newly purchased firearms behind the cans of tuna and beef jerky they have stored in a cabinet and only bring them out if the zombies start to appear. That's a direct quote. Now, when I asked Mr. Chipman about this troubling statement in his television interview, he attempted to say that the statement was misunderstood and that it was taken out of context. That's simply not true. I watched the TV interview, hoping and frankly expecting that I had misunderstood his condescension toward first-time gun owners in 2020. Many of those first-time gun owners in 2020, by the way, were minorities and women. But unfortunately, that was not the case. I watched it to get the context. That was the context. That's exactly what he had said. There was no taking it out of context. That was the entire context. When asked about inaccurate statements he made when lobbying against suppressors, namely that only gun lobbyists and criminals, this is an exact quote, only gun lobbyists and criminals who want to kill people would benefit, close quote, from the deregulation of gun suppressors. Again, when asked about this question, he dodged the question. Mr. Chipman refused to recognize that many lawful gun owners want to purchase suppressors to protect their hearing, which is a lawful purpose last time I checked, but find the burdensome NFA registration process and the $200 tax stamp on top of the cost of the suppressor to be something that is prohibitive. When pressed by multiple senators on his advocacy for an assault weapons ban on AR-15s, Mr. Chipman proved equally evasive, refusing to provide his definition of an assault weapon. Now, has he suddenly forgotten the policies he's advocated for over the last 5 years? I highly doubt it. It's much more likely that he wanted to obscure his true anti-gun views from the American people. The only straight answer he gave was that he supports a ban on not just the manufacture and sale of AR-15 rifles, the most popular rifles in America, but even the possession of AR-15 rifles unless registered under the NFA. That means he wants to make the millions of law-abiding Americans who currently own AR-15 rifles go through the burdensome process of registering them with the ATF, the organization he now wants to head. I asked Mr. Chipman about the following troubling statement he posted on Reddit. Quote, while at ATF, I conducted studies involving people who failed background checks to determine how many later committed crimes with a gun. Many did. This is a perfect opportunity to arrest people before committing crimes rather than responding after the fact, close quote. That is a direct quote. He actually said that. Now, my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I would ask you, regardless of which political party you belong to, imagine that if a president of either political party said that for any other nomination, particularly if it was a president of the opposite political party to which you belong. If somebody who had been nominated to head an important law enforcement agency within the federal government had said that, you'd find it troubling. I have no doubt that you would, because we don't arrest people before they commit crimes. That's the sort of thing that's reserved for bad post-apocalyptic dystopian novels and movies. Now, in this instance, Mr. Chipman attempted to say that statement was taken out of context and that he was referring only to those people who had committed the predicate crime of quote unquote lying and trying. But this answer was unconvincing. Setting aside the serious Second Amendment concerns with this statement, completely setting those aside, confirming someone to lead a federal law enforcement agency with this lack of respect for the most fundamental notions of due process, who makes statements that sound like they came out of the movie Minority Report, is appalling and incredibly concerning to the millions of law-abiding gun owners in America. For these reasons and many, many others, I strongly oppose the nomination of David Chipman to be the director of ATF.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Feinstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I believe that David Chipman is not only qualified, but he's a person that we need in this position at this time. He's the leader that ATF needs, and I want to just share with you that I am very concerned about where this country is going with violence and guns. We are currently experiencing a wave of gun violence. So far, 21,000 people in the United States have died, lost their lives through gun violence. In fact, during Mr. Chipman's own nomination hearing, and while I was speaking, a gunman in San Jose, California, shot and killed 9 innocent people. So there are staccato shots of guns that, like I've never heard, in the numbers that are building up. Mr. Chipman's support for the enforcement of common sense gun restrictions, his dedication to ensuring that the ATF fulfills its mission of protecting our country, make him the candidate we need in this role at this time. I think he's uniquely qualified to lead the ATF. He's a former ATF agent. He knows what it's like on the streets. And I learned in a long time as mayor that the streets teach you a lot about what people are doing and thinking. He's not uniquely qualified to lead the ATF. So I think I will strongly vote for him. I hope enough members will vote for him, because with 21,000 people now dead from gun violence just in a short period of time, I think we need to look a little differently at what these jobs mean. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. Senator Blackburn, and then Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and pardon me. We all know that the Second Amendment protects and guarantees our right to keep and bear arms. And the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives plays an important part in combating crime and protecting public safety. The director of the ATF should be an individual who is capable of pursuing this mission while maintaining a nonpartisan atmosphere within the organization and protecting the rights of law-abiding citizens. Now, that is the mission. Based on what we've all heard from Mr. Chipman in his testimony, based on what we've read and reviewed statements that he has made, he is showing himself incapable of meeting that mission and doing so in a nonpartisan and even-handed way. What we would expect from anyone that we appoint. Now, there are roughly 15.5 million Americans that hold hunting licenses. Nearly 20 million Americans have a concealed carry permit. I am one of those that has a concealed carry permit.
Don't mess with Marcia.
Roughly 4 in 10 Americans report having a registered firearm in their residence, and nearly every major study has found that firearms are used in self-defense between 500,000 and 3 million times each and every year. That is the right of American citizens. Mr. Chipman has demonstrated through his testimony that he will neither respect nor protect the right to bear arms. There are 16 states, 30% of our nation, that allow citizens to openly carry their guns. And you've just heard about his Reddit Ask Me Anything interview. He stated there that open carry is frightening, and he thinks this is a fear we should avoid. Tennessee is a constitutional carry state. Mr. Chipman made clear in his testimony last month that he wants to ban the future manufacturing and sale of, and I'm quoting him, assault weapons. But he has demonstrated that he has an alarming misunderstanding of what an assault weapon actually is. I asked him if he referred to common semi-automatic rifles as assault weapons, and he affirmed yes, he did. His definition, as Senator Cotton put it so aptly, would effectively ban all sporting rifles in the United States. But we know Mr. Chipman is no fool. Mr. Chipman has an agenda. It would be abridging our Second Amendment rights. It would be banning semi-automatic rifles and sporting rifles for those 15.5 million Americans that have a hunting license. He has a decorated history with the anti-gun lobby. As has been referenced, he has lobbied for Everytown for gun safety and was a senior policy advisor at the Giffords campaign. He has lobbied against high-capacity guns, but has defined a high-capacity gun as anything that holds more than 10 bullets at a time. He has advocated overturning the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which would leave gun manufacturers liable for what purchasers do with their guns. I want you to think about that. It would make the gun manufacturers liable for what purchasers do with their gun. The logic falls apart when you apply it elsewhere. We do not hold auto manufacturers liable when drivers cause pileups. Most of the U.S. drives to and from work every day. Can you imagine what would happen if we suddenly applied this type logic to the actions of every single driver in this country? The logic with respect to guns is no different, but Mr. Chipman is far too partisan to see that. Again, he is no fool. He does have an agenda. And in 2017, he co-authored a blog for Giffords calling for 50 cal rifles to be regulated under the National Firearms Act. In other words, Mr. Chipman is willing to lie to push his anti-gun agenda. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives deserves a better leader. Americans deserve a better leader. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Blackburn. Senators requesting recognition are Senator Leahy, Klobuchar, and Hawley. Blumenthal. Cope. Cornyn. Senator Leahy.
Mr. Chairman, it seems that any time we have any question, if anybody's going to be there to follow the law and to enforce the law when it involves guns, you would think that we're suddenly disarming people of the United States. We know people in the United States are not disarmed. We see this every other day. There's a mass shooting in the United States, and people do have guns. Mr. Chipman's lifelong gun owner. But he knows that responsible gun ownership and common sense safety measures go hand in hand. We've had the we've had the Bureau without a permanent director since 2015. Well, there's probably a reason for that, because every time anybody talks about going in there to the alcohol, tobacco, firearms, everyone starts saying, oh my gosh, they're going to take our guns away. Well, I'm a gun owner. I'm probably the only person in this room that has a pistol range in his backyard. How many members of this committee have a pistol range in their backyard? Okay, so we got 3 and me, 4.
I don't. I don't have one.
You don't have one. Your backyard is a little bit different than my 300-acre farm, let me tell you. But the point is, I helped myself through college with a scholarship because of my skill on the rifle team. And the medals I won, the competitions I won. Somebody who's born blind in one eye, that was one thing I could do. I enjoy shooting. I enjoy target shooting. I also was a prosecutor, and I convicted a lot of people who used guns in crimes. People who already had felonies and still were able to buy guns at gun shows. People who were end up sometimes killing people because of that, who should have been safe. Let's not be afraid of somebody actually enforcing the laws that are on the book, which is what Mr. Chipman do. I'm not afraid of that. I'm not going to have my guns taken away, nor a set of coordinates, nor any other law-abiding person. But if we're going to have laws on the books that the ATF is supposed to enforce, well, let's, after all these years without a permanent director, let's have one. I'll vote for it.
Senator seeking recognition, Klobuchar, Hawley, Blumenthal, Cornyn. Any others? Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I want to put this in a context beyond Mr. Chipman. I led the effort for the last ATF director that actually got confirmed. You have to go back nearly 20 years. We've had one. He was from Minnesota. So during the time of Donald Trump, we had no confirmed ATF director. So I don't think this is just about Mr. Chipman. I think this is about the NRA. I think it's about people not wanting to hurt themselves and get some kind of points off or a B grade instead of an A grade. That's what I think this is about. Because when I did this back a few years back, it was toward the end of President Obama's term. The guy's name is Todd Jones. He was a decorated Marine. He was the U.S. attorney. And I had to work all day one day just to get him through on a cloture vote. He was the acting U.S. attorney. He was at the acting U.S. attorney, but he was also the acting ATF director, had not been in any scandals, had done a good job by all accounts when he was there, having inherited an agency that had some issues. But I got finally, after I think it was 8 hours we left the vote open. I got 6 Republicans to vote with me. 2 of them are still here, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. One of them was John McCain. You want to question his views on guns? I don't think so. Well, I think what this is about the NRA. David Chipman, he has spent his career working to keep the American people safe. He served at the ATF for almost 25 years, more than half of the agency's existence as a special agent, field office manager, and chief of the firearms program divisions. If confirmed, he would actually be the first director to have served as an ATF special agent. So to say this is just some political appointment when it's actually the first guy that would have worked there for a long time, I think that's wrong. A lifelong gun owner, Mr. Chipman knows that responsible gun ownership and common sense safety measures go hand in hand, and his approach to gun violence stems from his belief that it is possible to balance rights and responsibilities. For many years, I have led the bill, common sense legislation, to close a dangerous loophole that allows domestic abusers to buy a gun simply when they're not married to the victims, but in fact are their boyfriend. We had a hearing on this many, many years ago, and Senator Grassley had several witnesses, very conservative witnesses, a conservative sheriff. And while they did not agree with the stalking portion of the bill, they actually agreed with closing this loophole, full stop, every single one of them. Yet, we can't even seem to get that done because of the NRA. Mr. Chipman's nomination has the support of numerous organizations, including the Hispanic American Police Command Officers Association, the Police Executive Research Forum, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and 17 current state attorney generals. His decades of experience in law enforcement make him exactly the right nominee for this critical position. And when I asked him, as ATF director, would he take on this small issue of closing this loophole that the Republican witnesses support, he said it would be one of his top priorities to get this done if he was confirmed as ATF director. So I don't think we can just look at this nominee on some isolated island. This is a part of a whole effort. Political, he's not political. How we've handled the ATF has been political, or we would have had a director under Donald Trump, we would have had a director confirmed under President Obama, and I wouldn't have had a cloture vote held open for 8 hours for a decorated Marine just to be able to have him be the only person confirmed as head of the ATF, the only person in 20 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. We'll recognize Senator Hawley next. Senator Blumenthal, Cornyn, and Kennedy are in the wings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to say that I appreciated Senator Feinstein raising the issue of violent crime. I thought that that was an important point to make, and I appreciated her comment that the streets teach you a lot. And I think this is an important context for today's vote and indeed the issues that are facing the committee. As a former head prosecutor of my state, former attorney general of my state, I agree with that comment that the streets teach you a lot. I think that's absolutely right. And what the streets are teaching us now is that we are in the midst of a massive violent crime wave in this country. A massive violent crime wave in this country. Homicides are up over 30% in our major cities over the last year. That includes in my state. I have police officers when I go home to my state who beg me for help. And I mean beg me for help. Whether it's big cities, Missouri's a diverse state. We've got big cities, we've got small towns, we've got rural areas. And wherever I go, police officers come to me and they say, we are desperate for help. We are outmanned, we are outgunned, we are overwhelmed, we can't recruit people, our morale is collapsing, we feel we have no support. It is a simple reality, and the American people are feeling it. The people in my state are feeling it. They are afraid to go out at night. They're afraid to go out on the streets. They're afraid to drop their children off at school. And this is not the United States of America that we should have. This is a pressing issue that is affecting every single American, and yes, every cop in America. And I hope, Mr. Chairman, I raise this because I hope this committee will soon turn to this issue of violent crime in our country, and do something about it, and do something to support the men and women in blue who are out there on the line. And I have to say that in this context, when Mr. Chipman says things like, with regard to the Secret Service, I asked him about this when he was sitting right over there. He said in 2012 that their, meaning the Secret Service, use of guns, shooting guns is not necessary. Interesting idea. He goes on then to say, we need to think of strategies like that, of just covering and evacuating in our schools. Now, he denied that he said that when he was in front of us. I don't know why, because it's on the record. We gave it to him as a QFR. I mean, you can go read the transcript yourself. My point is this. I don't think that our schools should be less safe. I can't vote for someone who says we ought to make schools in this country less safe in the midst of a crime epidemic. I don't know what I would tell the parents in my state. And when I look at Mr. Chipman's agenda, which is to take away Second Amendment rights from law-abiding citizens while violent criminals are loose on our streets, I just have to say, Mr. Chairman, I just respectfully disagree that that's the right agenda for us to have at this time. So I will not be supporting Mr. Chipman, and I hope that the committee will soon turn its attention to the epidemic of violent crime in our country. I hope we can find some solutions that we can agree on, and I respectfully submit, this is a question for another time, I respectfully submit that increasing officer pay and increasing the number of officers on the street is something where we might start. But for those reasons, I'll be opposing Mr. Chipman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hawley. We have 3 senators seeking recognition, and I will close the debate at that point. We'll have a vote on Mr. Chipman at that moment. Senator Blumenthal is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, a number of us on this committee share an experience in law enforcement. Like my colleague from Missouri, I was our state's attorney general for some 20 years. I was the United States attorney in Connecticut, the chief federal prosecutor, and I believe more than anything, and I talk about it frequently, in enforcement, fair and effective enforcement of our laws. In fact, our laws are dead letter unless they're enforced. And that's why I'm going to vote for David Chipman. He is above everything else an enforcer. That's his life's experience, 25 years as an agent in ATF. He believes in enforcement. And if my colleagues across the aisle are really serious about stopping the wave of gun violence that we see in our streets, they will vote for David Chipman. If they are really serious about stopping violent crime, they will support effective enforcement of laws. And we can agree that this nation is awash in an ocean of crime guns, stolen and lost guns that have spurred a wave of violent crime across the country, focused mainly on the streets and communities that have those lost and stolen guns. So very briefly, there is a lot of mischaracterization and misrepresentation of what David Chipman has done or said. At the end of the day, it is his enforcement background that makes him eminently qualified. I agree that we should address gun violence. In fact, Subcommittee on the Constitution has been having hearings on gun violence, on ghost guns, and flag statutes, and other measures that can help to stop gun violence. So I welcome that focus and hope that we will confirm the nomination of a man who will be the second, only the second, director of ATF, a man who has spent 25 years of his life at that agency, a man who is dedicated to making these laws real in people's lives and making our streets and communities safer. And if my colleagues are really serious about fighting crime, they will say no to the NRA and other groups that have said again and again they want effective enforcement. They say continuously they want enforcement of existing laws, not new laws. So if they want effective enforcement, they ought to be in favor of David Hitman. And we need new laws, no question, but we also need effective enforcement.
Thanks, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Cruz is now asked to be added to the list. I would just say to the members, this is a critically important issue and deserves all the time that we're going to devote to it. I don't question that for 1 minute. We have one other nomination and several bills before us today. We have other committees that have scheduled hearings and we have votes scheduled at 10:30 or 10:45. So the cooperation of the members in making their comments concise would be appreciated. Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be brief. When Mr. Chipman came before the committee, I asked him whether he believed that a law-abiding gun owner was a threat to public safety. paraphrasing his answer, he said, no, Senator, until they commit a crime. In other words, he views law-abiding citizens as potential criminals and uses that as a justification to restrict their rights under the Second Amendment to the Constitution. Like Senator Blackburn, and Senator Leahy, I guess, I'm a gun owner, and I don't believe I'm a threat to public safety. I don't believe Senator Leahy or Senator Blackburn are a threat to public safety as law-abiding gun owners. I see them as exercising their rights under the Second Amendment, and I support that. Most of our states have license to carry laws. Some states, like Vermont, you can carry a gun without a permit. And my state is joining Vermont with recent legislative action because we don't believe law-abiding gun owners are a threat to public safety, unlike apparently the nominee. But I would just say that anyone surprised with the desire of American citizens to purchase firearms and defend themselves and their families and their property in response to the defund police effort, I can't imagine why they would be surprised. If people believe that the law enforcement in their community should be defunded, the combination of that, along with the Ferguson effect that I think former FBI Director Comey talked about, the hesitancy of law enforcement to aggressively enforce the laws because of fear that they would be criticized if not prosecuted. Seen this reflected in the increased morale of law enforcement departments all across the country, difficulties in recruiting, huge increases in police officers retiring. Morale in our police departments is in the tank, primarily because of this unjustified effort to attack the very people we depend upon for our safety. That the more and more Americans are seeking to defend themselves by exercising their Second Amendment rights should not be a surprise. So, Mr. Chairman, I will not support Mr. Chipman's nomination for the very reason that he views all law-abiding Americans as potential criminals. I think that's disqualifying.
Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't going to say anything, but I feel the need to respond to the comments of my good friend, Senator Klobuchar. I think even a cursory examination of Mr. Chipman's record and even a casual observer of his testimony can see that he is a zealot. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a zealot. This is America. You can believe what you want. But he's being asked to run an agency whose mission is to even-handedly apply the law. And the reason I'm voting against this gentleman is I believe he will use his position, based on his record and his testimony, to try to prosecute an agenda that he can't get by the voters through their elected representatives. And I wanted to say that for the record. Now, Senator Klobuchar, if you have any evidence that I'm voting against this gentleman, and I say this gently because I'm worried about the NRA or losing points on the NRA, I'd like to hear it.
I have the evidence that we have not confirmed an ATF director during this entire last 2 decades, except for one. And I was directly told as I tried to get votes to get cloture by Republicans that they were concerned about how the NRA would rate.
But I'm asking about this Republican.
That is my evidence of
I'm
what's
asking
happening.
about this Republican.
I can't get inside your brain or know your politics. I'm just saying in general, there is more evidence besides this one man about what's going on in our legislative efforts, what's going on in Congress, why we haven't been able to pass even common sense background checks when 90% of the American people support them. So I think this is much bigger than one guy. I just thought that point should be made.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And
Thank you.
by the way, even President Trump's nominee was too, because of concerns by Republicans on the gun issue. So it just never ends.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The last speaker before me, I think, is Senator Cruz, unless someone else is seeking recognition. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, it's interesting to hear our Democratic colleagues saying boogeymen under every rock. And there is the frightful specter of the NRA on one side. There's the frightful specter of the Koch brothers on the other side. There are charts of dark money with red string and all sorts of perceived connections. There is a simpler explanation, which is that the American people actually value our right to keep and bear arms. You want to know who the members on this side are listening to? It's not some interest group. It's the hundreds of millions of Americans who want their constitutional rights protected, who want to be able to defend their families, and who don't want to see the government taking away their right to defend their home, their lives, and their family. That's something our Democratic friends don't seem to understand. This is not about a checkbook in Washington, D.C. This is about millions of constituents at home. I promise you, when John Cornyn and I go home, it's not the NRA we're worried about. It's Texans looking at us saying, don't you let them take our guns. And there are folks in every state here who feel that way. You know, it was striking during the campaign. In August 2019, Joe Biden was asked about people who think that a Biden administration, quote, means they're going to come for my guns. And Biden replies, bingo, you're right. If you have an assault weapon, the fact of the matter is they should be illegal, period. So we can thank President Biden for letting the cat out of the bag. He's made clear his agenda. Let's use the exact words, they're going to come for my guns. Bingo. That's what Joe Biden promised America he wanted to do. And in this case with Mr. Chipman, this is the manifestation of the promise, we're going to come for your guns. Mr. Chipman is a gun control zealot. He spent the last 6 years of his life working for one of the leading gun control organizations. And he came before this committee, and his testimony was remarkable. He testified that he thought Senator Feinstein's legislation on assault weapons didn't go nearly far enough. Now, Senator Feinstein and I disagree on that legislation, disagree strongly. Her sentiments are heartfelt, they're genuine. But Mr. Chipman said Senator Feinstein didn't go nearly far enough. She sought to ban some 2,000 different models of rifle, but he said it didn't go nearly far enough because he'd go after every single weapon people own right now, that he wouldn't just focus on the new sales. He was interested in whatever guns you have at your home right now to defend your family. And to be clear, Senator Feinstein's legislation wasn't just filed, it wasn't just considered in this committee, it was voted on the Senate floor. In the year 2013, I just arrived at the Senate. I was a brand new freshman. Had been here about as long as Senator Padilla, Senator Awesome. Harry Reid Senate. I was in the minority. There was a substantial majority of Democrats in the Senate. Senator Feinstein's bill to ban so-called assault weapons, voted on the Senate floor, received 40 yes votes and 60 no votes in a Democratic Senate. Among the senators voting no were Senator Bennett, Senator Heinrich, Senator Manchin, Senator Tester, Senator Udall, Senator Warner, all Democrats voted no. And Mr. Chipman says that bill that in a Harry Reid Democratic Senate could muster only 40 votes. It didn't go far enough. We need to be even more aggressive going after your guns. Now, I recognize in extreme left partisan environments, that sounds like a terrific idea. I recognize that there are Democrats who've run for office promising that we need judges and justices on the Supreme Court who will vote to overturn the Heller decision and to, in effect, repeal the individual right to keep and bear arms. But that's not the view of the American people. And it's not some mysterious lobby in town. It is hundreds of millions of Americans that value their freedom, their constitutional rights. I got to tell you, this past year, there were a whole lot of Americans who hadn't actually thought a lot about the Second Amendment until suddenly we had riots in American cities all across the country. Till suddenly we had police cars being firebombed and shops being looted and people being murdered on the street in city after city after city. And we saw local Democratic politicians turn a blind eye to the violence. One Democratic politician described weeks and weeks of rioting and burning and violence, described it as, it's the summer of love. Well, I think actually elected officials have a responsibility to keep their citizens safe. I think writing off rioting and criminal violence as the summer of love is incredibly cynical and a dereliction of duty. But you know what? In a lot of those blue states, in a lot of those blue cities in blue states, there were a whole lot of folks that suddenly went to a gun store and said, you know what, if there's going to be a riot outside my house, I want to be able to defend myself if someone starts coming in the door or coming in the window seeking to do harm for my family. And by the way, when you have Democrats proposing abolishing the police, and not just proposing it, implementing it in cities like Minneapolis and cities like Portland and cities like New York City and cities tragically like Austin, Texas, slashing the budgets for police and seeing crime skyrocket, and then scratching their heads going, gosh, why would crime skyrocket? We just slashed the budgets for the police. You can understand why people say, if you're going to take away the police officers, for God's sakes, don't take away my ability to defend my family. I think Mr. Chipman is a nominee who is far out of the mainstream. If his position is what he told this committee, that he thinks we should go much further than Senator Feinstein's legislation, which commanded only 40 votes in a Democratic majority Senate, that does not reflect where the American people are. And this nomination is a chance for Senate Democrats to decide. I assume the membership of this committee that every Democrat in this committee is going to vote for Mr. Chipman. This tends to be a committee on both sides of the aisle that attracts some of the members who are more comfortable with taking clear positions. But there are at least some Democrats in the conference who, when they go home to their home states, they tell their constituents they support the Second Amendment. Some ways I'm grateful to President Biden for making this nomination because it's a clarifying moment. Every one of those Democrats who goes home and tells their constituents, no, I believe in the Second Amendment. No, I don't believe in confiscation. No, I won't ban guns. No, we shouldn't do that. Well, we got a nominee who supports confiscation, who wants to ban guns, who wants a registry, and who was appointed to carry out Joe Biden's promise, bingo, we're coming after your guns. So now it's a chance for each of the 50 Democrats to decide, where do you stand?
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Senator Cotton has asked for recognition.
Yeah, I'll keep this brief. I think in some ways, David Chipman for President Biden is a perfectly suitable nominee because the Biden-Harris administration has already marked itself out as the most anti-gun and pro-crime administration in American history. President Biden gave a speech yesterday afternoon that was supposed to be about how to stop a crime wave that is crashing across this country with a murder rate that's increased in the single biggest jump on record over the last year. And what did he do? He basically threw in the towel. He said, yeah, I know that murders and violent crime went up a lot last year, and they went up a lot in the first few months of this year. But, well, crime goes up in the summer months too, so it's going to get even worse over the next 3 months. So I hope you don't get killed walking the streets of your community. And then what did he talk about? Did he talk about imposing tough sentences on people who commit crimes? Did he talk about adding more cops to the streets and quit attacking cops? No. He talked about gun control, about harassing law-abiding gun owners and gun stores, focusing on a kind of rifle that is less commonly used in murders in America than blunt objects like hammers and bats and frying pans and your bare fists. The vast majority of murders and crimes in this country are committed by pistols, to be almost totally unaffected by some of the Democrats' proposals. So think about what Joe Biden wants to do. He wants to ignore the gun crimes that are happening in cities across America while he takes away the rifle you have in your home to protect yourself from those very criminals. So again, it shouldn't be surprising that he's nominated a man like David Chipman, an anti-gun radical. In his hearing, I asked him very simply, what is an assault weapon? And he couldn't define it because it's a made-up, fictitious term crafted by a bunch of liberal pollsters and lawyers and politicians in Washington to describe a kind of weapon based on mere cosmetic features. Go into a gun store, look at the labels in the aisles. You can find an aisle for shotguns, you can find one for pistols, you can find one for rifles. You won't find one for assault weapons because it is a fake, made-up term. Now, when I pressed him, he finally acknowledged that he would call a assault weapon, let me be precise here, any semi-automatic weapon larger than a .22 caliber with a detachable magazine. That is almost every modern sporting rifle in America. That is one of the most radical proposals that we've ever heard in Congress. And again, it would do almost nothing to affect the gun crimes that are happening in this country right now. Now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and all the Democrats in the Senate can talk about why we have this crime wave. Oh, it's the pandemic. People are isolated. They're unemployed. Woe is us. What are we going to do? Well, guess what? The pandemic is basically over and crime is still going up. Other countries face this pandemic as well. They didn't have such a large increase in crime. Let me tell you why we have a large increase in crime. One, we are letting violent, serious, repeat felons out of prison, as this Congress did with the First Step Act. We are refusing to send them to prison in the first place, as radical prosecutors like Chesa Boudin in San Francisco refuse to even do their job. And three, we are harassing the police for doing their jobs, and we are slashing their budgets. That's why we have a crime wave in America. And until we stop it, that crime wave will continue.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. A lot has been said about what Joe Biden believes. Let me read from a statement yesterday. I hope all of you have it. Fact sheet provided by the administration addressing the issues of crime and how to deal with them. Read the opening paragraph page. Strategy will use the rescue plan, the American Rescue Plan, which we know full well, Democratic side, the American Rescue Plan's historic funding levels and clear guidance to help state, local, territorial, and tribal governments get the money they need to put more police officers on the beat, with the resources, training, and accountability they need to engage in effective community policing. In addition to supporting proven community violence intervention programs, summer employment opportunities, and other investments we know will reduce crime. Page after page. Page 5, provide law enforcement the tools and resources they need to tackle gun violence. Does that sound like Joe Biden's throwing in the towel on law enforcement? No, not to me. It sounds like he's making an investment in law enforcement, which we all, at least I applaud, and I think is absolutely essential. You see, I represent the city of Chicago, and I'm proud to do it, but we are facing a wave of gun violence and death unheard of, and we're not the only place. And it isn't just because it's a blue mayor in a blue city in a blue state. It's happening in the downstate red counties and communities as well. One of the reasons I think is very obvious. We are awash in guns, awash in guns. Go into the toughest neighborhoods of Chicago and ask the teenagers there how quickly they can provide you with a gun if you have $50 in hand. And they'll tell you 15 minutes. Can you wait 15 minutes? Over 400 million guns in a nation of 350 million people. We don't think there's a cause and effect here. They decide to sell guns at gun shows in northwestern Indiana without a background check. Those guns find their ways into the streets of Chicago. That's what we have to deal with. In terms of representing the view of the American people, our friends on the other side have a view of that. 84% of the American people, including most gun owners, believe we should have meaningful background checks. This committee is virtually incapable of passing such legislation. And 54% of Americans, despite all the rhetoric we've heard on assault weapons, believe that they should be at least licensed, not licensed, but at least monitored. And some would go so far as to say they shouldn't be sold. But the fact is, we're not dealing with radical notions when the majority of the American people support what we're saying. The point I would like to make as I close is that we're talking about one individual, David Chipman. Going back to the point made by Amy Klobuchar earlier, the reason that they leave this ATF position vacant is because there's less enforcement as a result of it. And unfortunately, that has been the case, as you well know. David Chipman has certainly been involved in gun safety organizations, but he also has the support of law enforcement, including the Hispanic American Police Commanders, the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, 17 current state attorneys general, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, National Black Police, Sheriff David Mahoney of Dane, Wisconsin, Women in Federal Law Enforcement, Prosecutors Against Gun Violence. We all have our opinion on this individual, and I think it's time for us to take a roll call vote. The clerk will call the roll on David Chipman.
Mr. Leahy.
Aye.
Ms. Feinstein. Mr. Whitehouse. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Coons.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal. Ms. Verona. Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Oswald.
Aye.
Mr. Grassley.
No.
Mr. Graham. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Lee. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Sachs. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Tillis. Ms. Blackburn. Chair Durbin. Chair, votes are 11 yeas, 11 nays.
The committee's recorded a tie vote on Mr. Chipman's nomination to be Director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives pursuant to Section 3, subsection 1A of Senate Resolution 27 of the 117th Congress. I'll transmit to the Secretary of the Senate a notice of this tie vote under Section 3, Section 1B of that resolution. Either the majority or minority leader may then make a motion to discharge the nomination. Next, we have the nomination of Cherdew to be Director of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. Does any senator seek recognition? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Leahy.
Aye.
Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Whitehouse. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Coons. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Rono. Mr. Booker. Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Oswald.
Aye.
Mr. Grassley.
No.
Mr. Graham.
No, but proxy.
Mr. Cornyn.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No, but proxy.
Mr. Cruz.
No.
Mr. Sachs.
No, but proxy.
Mr. Hawley.
No, but proxy.
Mr. Cotton.
No.
Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Tillis.
Pass.
Mrs. Blackburn.
No, by proxy.
Chair Durbin.
Aye.
Chair, the votes are 11 yeas, 10 nays, 1 pass.
Nomination will be favorably reported to the floor. We have two bipartisan bills on the markup agenda today, ripe for consideration. Urban Grassley Cameras in the Courtroom Act and the Grassley-Klobuchar Sunshine in the Courtroom Act. I believe members are familiar with these. I hope they are. The first one, Senate Bill 807, I want to read so that there's no misunderstanding of the intent of this. So it says, the Supreme Court shall permit television coverage of all open sessions of the court unless the court decides by a vote of majority of the justices that allowing such coverage in a particular case would constitute a violation of due process rights of one or more parties before the court. That is the sum and substance of the legislation. Any comments or amendments? Senator Leahy.
Could I be edited?
Senator Leahy, without objection, be added as co-sponsor. Senator Cornyn.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to support this legislation. I served 13 years as a Texas judge, 6 on the trial bench, 7 on the Texas Supreme Court. And on the Texas Supreme Court, we had stationary cameras, which were unobtrusive, and basically the casual observer would not even know that the proceeding was being televised. So I know that it is possible to have televised proceedings that do not disrupt the trial or the appellate argument. And I think most people who think about televised court proceedings, they relate back to the O.J. Simpson trial, which was an absolute circus. And unfortunately, I think did create a
All right. So he got a tie vote. So I got to look into exactly what's going to happen with this one, because what I've been told, let me see if I can make this smaller. Nope, that's the wrong way. There we go. So what I've been told is this has to go to, because this is a Senate hearing. The Senate's the one that figures out what they're going to do for this one. So I don't know if it's going to go to a complete House and Senate thing, but I'm pretty sure the Senate's the one that controls this. Oh, my background's kind of messed up. Let me fix this on. Wrong way. You know, fucking zooming in. Fixed. Okay. So from what I've been told, and I got to look into this, so don't quote me completely. Senate is the one, because this is a Senate hearing. The Senate is the one that votes. So the House has nothing to do with the voting of who gets in, who gets out. This is a Senate hearing. Senate thing, blah, blah, blah. So for a hearing like this, and like I said, this is what I'm told. It might be wrong, and I'm hoping I'm wrong. If there's a committee hearing like this, and there's a certain group of people who are brought together, and they're the ones who are supposed to vote on it, and it comes to a tie, then the head of the Senate is the one that gets the tie-breaking vote. And everyone knows the head of the Senate is the vice president, which right now is Kamala Harris, which pretty much is the president anyways. So we'll see if I'm accurate on that one. I don't know if I'm not. Nitro Max, thank you for the $5 donation. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping this will be something that they bring to the Senate floor for a vote. But even then, if it does go down party lines, it would still be a split vote, and Kamala Harris would still be the one to make the deciding factor. I'm going to look further into this and see exactly what it is. I am not an expert in how federal Senate works. I'm more versed into Texas state law than I am in federal law. But hopefully I am incorrect. Hopefully I'm wrong, because if I am right, that means that this douche nozzle is going to be the head of the ATF. Now, seeing the fact that he is a cuckboy beta male, hopefully he's just going to be an idiot who doesn't able to actually do anything. Kind of like, I mean, Biden, he's not really doing anything. He's just a face person that they put in there to let other people do stuff through him. Like, hey, Joey, sign this piece of paper because we all know you're a senile old fool and you can't do anything on your own. So if he does get in, hopefully that's the extent of what he can do. I mean, he's just basically a guy to say, hey, do this, hey, do that. And let's just face it, this guy does not have the leadership skills to be able to do things on his own. He's going to have someone pulling his strings and telling him what to do, which we all know from the millions of dollars he's made through, Every Town for Gun Safety, Gifford Group, thing of that nature. They're going to be telling him to do stuff with that. But we shall see. I'm going to try to get some more information. Once I do, I will put it out in a video probably later this week with a breakdown of what's going to happen next. Until then, I appreciate everyone coming and watching the live stream. I hope I didn't annoy you with my little banners too much. I try to be witty. Plus, I have to have some kind of transformative video going to it, so I have the ability to use it. Until then, y'all have a great day, and I shall see you next time.